My sister begged me for rent money, saying she was desperate, but when I checked her Venmo, I discovered she was giving all my money to her boyfriend. And then her drunk boyfriend showed up at my door and revealed the secret that destroyed my family forever. I'm 23 years old. I'm in my last year of college on a full scholarship. I work 2 part-time jobs for my expenses, and honestly, I thought I was doing everything right, until I discovered my family was using me like an ATM to finance my sister's disaster of a life. And when I say disaster, I mean the situation was so ridiculous that when everything finally came out, I couldn't even be surprised. I just felt this weird mix of fury and relief, like when you finally confirm something you already knew deep down, but didn't want to accept. I guess I should start by explaining what it was like growing up in my house, because none of this is going to make sense if you don't understand the dynamic that was there from the beginning. Sophie, my older sister, was always the favorite, like for as long as I can remember. She's 25 now. I mean, only 2 years older than me. But the way my parents treated her, you'd think she was some kind of princess who could do no wrong. When we were kids, if Sophie, I got a C on a test. My parents would say things like, "Oh, poor thing. She must be stressed. She needs a break." But when I got a B, it was like, why wasn't it an A? Ryan, you know you can do better. It's not like it was obvious abuse or anything like that. It was more subtle, that kind of favoritism that makes you feel like you're always competing for attention you're never going to get anyway. Sophie went to college, didn't finish, changed majors like 3 times, and eventually just stopped going without even officially withdrawing, and my parents never said anything to her. I, on the other hand, had to get perfect grades in high school to get my scholarship because I knew that if I didn't get it, I probably wouldn't be able to go to college at all. My parents never told me this directly, but it was always implied that the money that was there for college had already been spent on Sophie's failed attempts to find herself or whatever. After Sophie left college, she got like 4 different jobs in 2 years. None of them lasted more than 6 months because there was always some drama. A boss who hated her, toxic coworkers, impossible schedules. Basically, it was always someone else's fault. And during all that time, she was dating Jake. This guy who, honestly, I never understood what Sophie saw in him. Jake was like 28 years old, didn't have a stable job, lived with 2 roommates in an apartment that smelled weird even from outside, and every time I saw him at family gatherings, he was borrowing money or talking about some business he was going to start that obviously never started. The thing is that despite all this, every time there was a family dinner or gathering, Sophie was the center of attention. My parents would ask how Jake was doing, if they had thought about getting married yet, if Sophie was happy at her new job, and they'd ask me basic things like, "And how's school going for you?" Like I was an afterthought. Like my entire life was less interesting than the smallest detail of Sophie's life. Fast forward to like 8 months ago. I was in my second to last semester, working at a coffee shop in the mornings and tutoring in the afternoons, basically surviving on 4 hours of sleep and too much coffee. But things were going well academically, and I was proud of myself, for doing it all on my own. One Sunday, my parents called and told me they needed to talk to me about something important. I went to their house thinking maybe it was about the holidays or something, but when I got there, they were both sitting in the living room with those serious faces they make when they're going to ask you for something they know you're not going to want to do. My dad started with this whole introduction about family and how we have to support each other, and I already knew this was going to be about Sophie. Turns out Sophie was having trouble paying her rent. She had lost another job like a month ago, and Jake, surprise, surprise, wasn't contributing anything either because he was between projects, which basically meant he was unemployed. My parents told me they were already helping with some things, but they couldn't cover everything, and that if I could contribute to Sophie's rent for a few months while she got back on her feet, it would be a big help to the family. I tried to explain to them that I barely had enough for my own expenses, that I was saving for when I graduate next year, that I had books to buy, and that I literally worked 2 jobs while studying full-time. My mom did that thing she always does, where her eyes get kind of teary, and she says things like, "We're not asking you to do it forever, Ryan, just until Sophie recovers. She's your sister. You can't let her end up on the street." And my dad added that they made a lot of sacrifices for me too, that they paid for things when I was a kid. That family is about being there for each other in difficult times. Honestly, I felt like garbage. Because yes, technically, my parents paid for things when I was a kid. That's literally what parents are supposed to do. But the way they said it made me feel like I owed them something. Plus, there was this part of me that thought, maybe if I did this, if I finally did something important for the family, my parents would see me differently, would value me more. Stupid, I know, but at the time it made sense in my head, so I agreed. I told them I could send Sophie like $400 a month for 3 months, which was basically everything I had left after my essential expenses. It meant zero social life, zero going out, just work and study. Sophie called me that night crying and thanking me, saying I was the best brother in the world, that she was going to pay me back every cent when things got better, that this was temporary, the whole speech. The first 2 months, I didn't think much about it. I transferred the money through Venmo on the first of each month. Sophie sent me a thank you message, and I went on with my life. But then I started noticing weird things on Instagram. Sophie was posting photos at restaurants that looked expensive, like those places with small plates and ridiculous prices, and there were photos of her with new nails, with freshly done hair, with clothes that definitely weren't cheap. In one photo, she was at a bar with Jake and like 5 friends, and there were bottles on the table that I knew cost at least $200 each. At first I thought, well, maybe someone else invited her, or maybe it was a special occasion. I didn't want to be the bitter brother who complained about her going out once in a while. But the photos kept appearing. Like every weekend there was something new, and I started to feel this rage growing in my chest every time I opened Instagram and saw Sophie living better than me while I was sending her money I needed. One night, like at 2 in the morning, because that was the only free time I had, I was on my phone, unable to sleep, and I decided to check Venmo. I don't know why. I guess I had this weird hunch. Venmo is public by default, unless you change the settings, and it turns out Sophie never changed hers. I started scrolling through her transactions, and there it was, clear as day. The same day I sent her $400 in March, she sent $300 to Jake with a heart emoji. The month before, the day after I transferred to her, she sent $250 to Jake. She was literally taking my money, the money I was earning cleaning tables and explaining algebra to high school students, and passing it directly to her good-for-nothing boyfriend. I stayed awake the rest of the night, feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. It wasn't just the money, it was the fact that I had been used, that Sophie had cried on the phone thanking me while planning to give my money to Jake, that my parents had made me feel guilty for not wanting to help, and it was all a complete lie. I had screenshots of everything, every transfer, every Instagram photo with the dates. I had evidence of everything. The next day, I called my cousin Tyler, who has always been like a real brother to me, more than Sophie ever was. I told him everything, and he was furious, like angrier than me even. Tyler told me we had to confront Sophie, that I couldn't let this continue. And he was right. But I was scared of how my family was going to react. Tyler told me. He literally told me this. Ryan, if you don't stand up for yourself now, they're going to keep doing this for the rest of your life. Is that what you want? So we went to confront Sophie. Tyler drove to my campus, picked me up, and we went together to Sophie's apartment on a Saturday afternoon. I knocked on the door like 5 times before Sophie opened it. And when she did, she looked surprised to see us, like genuinely didn't expect us to come. I told her we needed to talk, and she said it wasn't a good time, that she had plans, but Tyler basically pushed the door open and we went in. The apartment didn't look like the apartment of someone who's struggling financially. There was a new TV in the living room, one of those big Samsungs. It must have cost easily $800, and there were shopping bags on the couch with logos from stores I couldn't even afford to look at. I showed her the Venmo screenshots on my phone and asked her directly what was going on, why she was sending my money to Jake when it was supposed to be for her rent. Sophie got defensive immediately. She started with excuses, saying Jake was struggling too, that she was just helping him like I was helping her, that it was complicated, and I didn't understand her situation. I told her I understood perfectly, that she was taking advantage of me and our parents, that I was working 2 jobs and studying full-time while she was spending money on outings and unnecessary things. Sophie started crying, doing that thing she always does where she plays the victim, saying I was cruel, that she was going through a lot of stress, that I had no right to judge her. Tyler stepped in and told her to stop with the drama, that nobody was buying her act, and that she needed to take responsibility for once in her life. Sophie yelled at us to leave, that she didn't have to explain anything to us, and basically kicked us out of her apartment. I left there feeling weird, like frustrated but also validated, because at least I had said something. I had confronted the situation instead of just swallowing the rage. That night, I called my parents and told them everything. Showed them the screenshots, the Instagram photos, everything. I expected them to be furious with Sophie, to finally see how manipulative she was, but their reaction was basically to defend her. My mom said maybe Sophie felt bad for Jake and that's why she was helping him, that it showed she had a good heart. My dad said it was complicated, that there were probably things I didn't understand, that Sophie was doing her best. I told them her best was taking advantage of me, that I wasn't going to send her another cent. And my mom started crying, saying I was being selfish, that Sophie really needed us. I hung up the phone, feeling completely exhausted. I couldn't believe that even with literal evidence that Sophie had been deceiving me, my parents found a way to make her seem innocent and make me feel like the bad guy in the story. Like 2 weeks of uncomfortable silence passed. I didn't talk to Sophie or my parents. I focused on my studies and work, trying to process everything. And then, in the middle of a Tuesday night, like at 11, someone was knocking on my door like crazy, like banging and yelling. I opened it, and it was Jake, completely drunk. He smelled like alcohol from the hallway, and he was yelling things about how I was an idiot and I had ruined everything. I tried to close the door, but he pushed it and came into my apartment, and Tyler, who was studying with me that night, immediately got up and got between Jake and me. Jake kept yelling, saying that because of me, Sophie was having problems, that I was a terrible brother. And then, in the middle of his drunk rant, he dropped something that left me frozen. He said something like, "She has a kid to take care of. She can't do this alone. She needs the money you were giving her." I was paralyzed. A kid. Sophie had a kid. Tyler asked Jake what he had said, and Jake, realizing he probably just revealed something he shouldn't have, tried to leave, but Tyler grabbed him by the arm and demanded he explain. Jake, still drunk and clearly without a filter, told us that Sophie had had a baby like 2 years ago, that nobody in the extended family knew because my parents had asked him to keep it secret, that the kid was living with Jake's aunt most of the time because neither Sophie nor Jake could take care of him consistently. I felt like my whole world was falling apart. Sophie had a 2-year-old son, and nobody had told me. My parents, I knew, and had chosen to keep me in the dark, while asking me for money, probably to help support a child I didn't even know existed. Tyler finally managed to get Jake out of my apartment, threatening to call the police if he didn't leave, and when the door closed, I sat on the floor and just stayed there processing everything. The next day I called my mom and asked her directly if Sophie had a child. There was this long, uncomfortable silence, and then my mom admitted that, yes, Sophie had had a baby 2 years ago, but she was having difficulties being a young mom, that Jake wasn't a good influence, that my parents were trying to help without the whole family finding out because Sophie was embarrassed. I asked her why they hadn't told me, why they had asked me for money without telling me the complete truth, and my mom said they thought I wouldn't understand, that I was too young and inexperienced to comprehend how difficult Sophie's situation was. I was beyond furious. I told them they had been lying by omission, that they had manipulated me into giving them money under false pretenses, that if they had told me the truth from the beginning, maybe I would have reacted differently, but that the deception was unforgivable. My mom tried to give me more excuses, saying they had done what they thought was best, that Sophie needed support, not judgment, and I told her what Sophie needed was to grow up and be responsible for once in her life, and that I was no longer going to be part of their system of enabling her irresponsible behavior. Like a week later, I got a message from Sophie saying she was being evicted from her apartment, that she couldn't pay the rent, that she urgently needed help. I didn't respond to her. Instead, I decided to do some investigating on my own. I looked up the building where Sophie lived, found the leasing office number, and called asking about Sophie's apartment. The person who answered, after verifying my identity as a family member, confirmed to me that Sophie owed like 3 months of rent, that my parents had been paying part, but it was never enough to cover the full amount, and that the eviction process was already underway. So basically, the money I had sent, the money my parents had sent, it had all gone to Jake, to outings, to shopping, and Sophie had never used a single cent for what really mattered. I sent all this information to my parents, every detail, every amount Sophie owed, and I asked them if they were finally going to make Sophie face consequences or if they were going to keep rescuing her forever. Sophie ended up being evicted. She moved back into my parents' house with the kid, who was now living with them full-time because Jake's aunt got tired of the situation. My parents, incredibly, kept defending her, saying she was doing her best, that being a single mom was hard, completely ignoring the fact that Jake was still in the picture and that Sophie had created this mess herself with her decisions. Like a month ago, my dad called me asking if I could contribute money for diapers and formula for the baby. I told him no, that I was done financing Sophie's bad decisions, that they needed to stop enabling her irresponsible behavior if they ever wanted her to become a functional adult. My dad got angry, said I was being selfish and cruel, that family was more important than money, and I told him that if family was so important, maybe they should have thought about that before using me and lying to me for months. I haven't talked to my parents since that call. Sophie has sent me like 10 messages, some apologizing, others blaming me for ruining her life, but I've ignored them all. I blocked Jake on everything after he tried to send me threatening messages telling me it was my fault that Sophie and the baby were struggling. Tyler keeps telling me I did the right thing, that I needed to set boundaries, and my girlfriend, who I met a few months ago and who has been incredibly understanding about all this, tells me the same thing. But I'm not going to lie. There are days where I feel guilty, where I think maybe I should try to fix things with my family, but then I remember all the lies, all the times they made me feel like I was the problem, and I know that walking away was the only right decision. I graduate in May. I have job interviews lined up in other cities, far from here. Part of me will always love my family, I guess, but I've accepted that I can't save Sophie, and it's not my job to do it. My parents are going to keep rescuing her. She's going to keep making bad decisions, and that cycle is probably never going to end. But I don't have to be part of it. I don't have to sacrifice my future and my peace of mind for people who don't value what I do or who I am. Last week, Tyler sent me a photo of him and his family on a picnic. Everyone's smiling, and he told me that was the family I deserved. People who support me without a hidden agenda, without manipulation. And he's right. I've started building my own definition of family, one that doesn't include people who only look for me when they need something. It still hurts. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't, but for the first time in months, maybe in years, I feel like I can breathe without feeling this constant pressure of not being enough, of having to prove myself constantly. And that, honestly, is worth more than any forced relationship with people who are never going to value me anyway.